Attackers are only getting more proficient, so how can you proactively adapt your cybersecurity strategy? Core Security by Fortra helps you uncover and prioritize the risks that pose the biggest threat to your organization. Core Impact is a penetration testing tool that safely finds and exploits vulnerabilities using the same techniques as attackers. You can conduct advanced pen tests with ease using certified exploits and automations. Take your engagements even further by pairing with our additional red teaming tools from Cobalt Strike and Outflank. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Fortra Core Security. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Security Weekly listeners save $100 on their RSA 2023 conference full pass. RSA conference will take place April 24th through 27th in San Francisco and on demand. To register using our discount code, please visit securityweekly.com/RSAC 2023 and use the code 53UCyber. That's 53, the letter U, Cyber. We hope to see you there. Travis Howerton joins us today to talk about the rise of RegOps, the need for compliance automation. As co-founder and chief technology officer of RegScale, Travis Howerton is responsible for the product development and R&D of RegScale's continuous compliance automation platform. Before joining the RegScale team, I'm not going to read your whole bio, but yeah, you've done a lot of great stuff here. Bechtel, the consolidated nuclear security, bunch of stuff out at Oak Ridge, ORNL. Stuff we're very familiar with here in East Tennessee. Knoxville's right next to Oak Ridge. We got Y12 out there, and you've done the round through DOE and a bunch of these places. Very interesting background, Travis.
Well, thank you. I've had the privilege of getting to serve my country in a variety of roles over 20 plus years in the Department of Energy and the Nuclear Weapons Program, from Y12 to NNSA headquarters to Oak Ridge National Lab. And it was a wonderful experience for the most part, with maybe the compliance pieces of that being the least enjoyable bits, which was then the impetus for the startup at RegScale and how we got to here.
You saw some room for improvement.
Well, that might be an understatement. It's one of those, if we locked you in a room with a group of 10 other people and asked you to design the most inefficient way to audit your security program and let you outbrief, I doubt you could come up with a more inefficient one than how the government and many highly regulated organizations do it today. We create huge Word documents and Excel spreadsheets that are out of date the moment that they're written. We then pretend that they're up to date until the audits come. Then we send the armies of people to go mad, scramble, try to update it. And it's just a losing battle as systems become more ephemeral. Everything goes to the cloud. It's just every part of the design of it is inefficient. And so we thought somebody ought to do something about this, because it's become the new long pole in the tent. It is the compliance wickets. The DevOps stuff has made infrastructure fast. Everything's code except for compliance. And we wanted to take our own unique spin on trying to solve that problem, so that compliance is something we can talk about again, because today it's Voldemort. It's thee who shall not be named. If you want to kill the party at a bar, just start talking compliance and audits, and nobody will want to be your friend. And so we just thought we'd take a different take on it to make it more effective, more efficient, more automated, and in line with sort of commercial practices for how the rest of security works.
Right. And you mentioned some of those obvious places where efficiencies can be gained. But let's maybe name out some of those, like clearly where you store the reporting, whatever you're handing to the auditor. That can be a living document, right? Like that can be something that's updated in real time. But the other big spot that occurs to me is evidence collection. A lot of that can be just fully automated. Nobody needs to be manually taking screenshots of things. What else is there that just struck you as like obvious opportunities for efficiency gains?
Yeah, there were several there. Evidence is an obvious one. Everybody has a breadth of continuous monitoring tools. And so it doesn't matter what your stack is. Everybody picks different tools, tunes them different ways, but there's heavy investment in monitoring networks and assets and other things. So collecting evidence with automation, machine-to-machine communication. We're built on top of the Open Security Controls Assessment Language, or OSCAL. Had the privilege of learning where Dr. Iorga at NIST was going there and thought we've got to get on that bandwagon and train. So we built our whole stack on compliance as code with the idea that your continuous monitoring could just attest to the controls, auto-update evidence with machine-to-machine communications. Then we started looking at other things like maintaining your asset inventory, keeping it always up to date, automating ticketing for vulnerabilities and patching, and even for third-party dependencies inside of CI/CD pipelines. All these things have rich telemetry. And so we're not the scanner. We are not the fixer of things. What we do is we try to sit in the middle of all of those, bring the data you already have, and make always on-demand, audit-ready, documentation-ready. So we just get rid of all the manual labor gopher tasks that we do with humans and try to make it as seamless as possible. And that was sort of the first foray into this space. And where we're starting to go now is, now that we have all this rich data, now that we have it in a machine-readable format, how can we apply AI and ML to make more automated decisions, to help with control authoring, to help with POAM risk assessments, and all the things that go into cyber compliance today? We think there's some killer use cases for AI ML. So basically what we're trying to do is just look at everywhere you can automate and let humans do what they're great at, which is interpret the data, make risk-based decisions, try to protect the company and its assets, and not be the gophers that pull evidence logs, that update inventory spreadsheets, that have to write 400-page plans by hand. And so that's been our focus. And we think we're in the very early stages of what we can automate, where we're automating 30 to 50% of a lot of the compliance checks that people are doing today, but we think you could probably get it closer to 80+% as a function of time and as we continue to invest in our product roadmap.
I guess my next question, as a company in this space, because you're changing the way things have been done, since there were spreadsheets and Word documents up until now, how much pushback do you get at all the different levels? Like, I imagine there's the pushback during the sales process, but mostly I would think people coming to you or have already seen the light and want compliance activities to suck less.
Yep.
But then they're going to run into issues, I imagine, internally where there's pushback on changing the way things are done. And then I think the third level there are the auditors, like how much of this can they, are auditors going to give them pushback, say, no, it needs to be in this format, or, this has to be a screenshot, or, I'm sure there's some silly stuff there that's just going to take, time to kind of whittle them down and get them towards acceptance.
Yeah. And I would say the resistance varies by level from, no resistance, they're France, they wave the white flag as soon as they see a tank, all the way up to sort of active war, depending on who you're talking to. And in the DevSecOps world, cyber engineering, no resistance. They hate dealing with auditors. They hate dealing with data calls and repetitive tasks. And so if there's a way to script this, engineer it, and never have to do it again, it falls right into the DevOps mindset. In addition, mission owners who are trying to bring a product to market, or who are in the DoD trying to compete with other global superpowers, we're getting laughed at by other countries who don't have to go through all this stuff, and they're able to do things much faster and cheaper than we can. And we stand in our own way. And it's well-intentioned stuff when you look at the regulations, but the cost and the time associated with getting through those wickets is severe. And then when you get to auditors, I would argue they're never going to change on some of this stuff. And so even though we're machine readable, what we're able to do is take that machine representation of an audit package, wrap it into our mega API, and then we transform it. And so you want a CMMC package for DoD, we can do that. You want a FedRAMP package, we can do that. You want a SOC 2 package, we can transform it into the Word and Excel documents they want on demand while still taking advantage of all the documentation. So one of the things we thought is if we could give them real time and it's always available, auditors would love it. That was a horrible planning assumption and sort of the early stages of RegScale. And what we've done instead is worked on transformations where we can take data from anywhere, we can get it into a common compliance as code standard, and then we can output it into any format they want to see, so that you don't have to have those wars about culture change and organizational change management. From their perspective, they get the same thing they've always gotten. From the DevOps world, they didn't have to deal with it at all. And I think that's where the clear win is that we're seeing in the market.
So you mentioned automating somewhere like 20, 30%. You want to get up to 80%. Do you have any stats on just like labor hours, like how much time you're able to save some companies?
Yeah, it depends on use case, but we're seeing anywhere from sort of 20 to 70% savings, depending on what they were trying to do manually and sort of how adept they are at DevOps and automation and scripting. So somewhat variable by standard, but more variable by customer sophistication and sort of what they want to automate and can afford to automate. And the bigger the organization is, the bigger those savings get. So 20% doesn't sound like a lot unless you're the Department of Defense or you're the Department of Homeland Security. And then that's real money at scale. And so it varies wildly by customer. We're also building out a pre-built set of integrations that just work out of the box. We work with 28 commercial tools today. We hope to be up to 50 to 100 by the end of the year. And so we're just going to keep adding to where more and more you just give us your stack. We plug into the center of it. We kind of like the early models of Splunk where everything just worked with it. There was an app for everything in Splunk. We want to be the same thing for compliance where you just drop it in. We pull data from wherever you have it. We can output in any framework you have, and compliance and being audit ready becomes a low risk, super affordable, easy to do sort of proposition versus the career ending expensive nightmare that it is today.
So the big four, PwC, E&Y, all those folks, how much is that looking like competition, or are they customers, or are they both? How concerned are you about the big audit firms from a market perspective?
Yeah, I think to some degree, we've talked to those folks. We're going to have trouble getting folks like that interested in what we do, or in some of the big SIs in government, because if you automate a lot of this manual work, then nobody can sell those butts and seats at high rates to the government. And so it's a disruption, right, to some of that. At the same time, I don't think this is an area where this automation is going to result in big layoffs, because you always want people to make risk-based decisions. You want a human doing that and factoring in a whole bunch of things. We just make it easier for them to have data. And my experience over my career is I've never been in an org where compliance and audit was fully staffed, because as soon as people get a chance to get out, they do. It's one of those pay your dues. You do it for a while, but as soon as I can hop to the incident response team or something that's a sexier part of cyber, you're out. And so I think this is an area where you can get people to full capacity without needing all the bodies, because the bodies don't exist in our labor market. There's way more need than there are way more jobs than there are people to staff them. So I think this is an area that helps get people closer to capacity for automating and being compliant and reducing risk without the need to staff expensive bodies that are hard to find.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of like talking about AI. Like it doesn't necessarily take everybody's jobs away, but it definitely changes them, and you have to learn how to incorporate this stuff within it. Which, since I brought it up, are you guys playing with like I imagine the LLM AI, particularly the stuff where you can just generate text, which compliance loves lots and lots of text.
Exactly.
Yeah. Talk a bit about how you see, these big changes. It seems like almost every market has been changed since OpenAI made ChatGPT open to the public and went to 100 million users in 2 months. Fastest
Yep.
growing application in the history of software. How are you guys looking at incorporating that into what you've already got?
Yeah, I think any software company that's not thinking about the AI ML disruption that's happening, we just took a quantum leap forward. I think we're at the start of the AI wars of AI based offense, AI based defense, and at RegScale AI based compliance. So some of that will be automated control authoring. There's some low hanging fruit sort of things. There's all sorts of things we can do around benchmarking and other things that I think can really push the needle in the art of the possible. Some of those things not quite ready to talk about in a public forum. There's some secret sauce, some things we may patent or IP we might protect, but this is an area that's as ripe for disruption as there is. It's an area that hasn't really evolved much since 1995 when Word and Excel first dropped on the world and went mainstream. Most compliance shops, even in billion-dollar organizations, still are powered by a lot of that same technology. And so we think this rise of IoT, machines talking to machines, continuous monitoring, where everybody takes cyber seriously nowadays, it's a board level issue. There's a lot of data. So it's a data rich thing. We just got to knock down some of these process silos, the same way that DevOps did to traditional sysadmins and kind of disrupted the way that that's done. I think AI is going to disrupt compliance greatly and in a good way. Because I don't think I've never met a customer yet where he said, what do you love about your compliance shop and your RMF and your ATO and those sorts of things. We've never had anyone like, man, I love it. It's so efficient. It's so enjoyable to do. It's always, man, I hate this. I don't even want to talk about it. It's this thing I have to do. And if I don't do it, I might get fired, but it's low value, high expense. And I think AI is going to turn that on its head where it's low cost, high value, which is where it should be.
And it boggles my, I think for a lot of people that are kind of down on AI and getting worked up over jobs being replaced and stuff like that, like you have to put it in the right context, right? Like a lot of this stuff, I think, and the reason I get so excited about it is it's replacing work that nobody wants to do. Like you said, the reason people don't stick around in a lot of these roles for a while, the joke used to be back in the day when I was a PCI QSA, was that anybody who lasted more than 2 years as a PCI QSA was a unicorn because it was just soul sucking work. Just exactly. Putting together the rock, gathering all the evidence, everything was going to be in Excel and just like a folder structure. And you had a folder structure for 1.1, 1.1.1. And you're manually building this folder structure. And I remember the early attempts to automate it were basically just putting that same folder structure and that same spreadsheet into a web app. And it was even slower. It was even slower than using Excel. So the first attempts at this went backwards, not forwards. I remember telling our management, hey, if you want me to use this PCI portal and put all the evidence in here, it took like 5 seconds to upload each bit of evidence, and I had 1,000 pieces of evidence. I was like, you're going to have to add at least 20 hours to every engagement. This is going to cost you that much more.
Yeah, it's insane. Sort of, I'll trade you sort of clips there. Mine, when I was in the nuclear weapons program, every time I get one of these huge system security plans, like they weren't little, they weren't light reading for the weekend. Like they'll stop a door. They're these really thick volumes you've got to read. And I'd always joke they hired me to lead, not to read. Right. And it's just like, this is just too much. And everybody knows like this probably isn't even true shortly after it's created because systems are dynamic. And if you look at where the industry's going, everything will be cloud-based, ephemeral, AI-driven. And this idea you're going to document it in static Word documents, spreadsheets, SharePoint lists, doesn't matter how you do it, legacy GRC tools. the processes won't survive the future. They can't. And most of the tools that were built, as you mentioned, were just light web portals that were less efficient than Word was at doing the same thing. And so they can't scale. They weren't designed for this kind of world. And so we thought there's a need to re-architect how you think about it, and then rethink the problem fundamentally, where you start with compliance as code, you wrap it in APIs, and everything's machine to machine, and you output what the auditors need with the least amount of human intervention possible. So those are sort of the design standards and how we think through the problem at RegScale.
Right. Katie?
I do. That's a good segue. Actually, I have a couple of questions. My first one is about the market. There seem to be just a slew of companies who are trying to do automated compliance. They've come out in the last few years, and so you're in a pretty busy space which both validates it but also makes it really hard. So can you tell us what really makes RegScale different and easier? You said you're having a lot of success with DevOps, so maybe you could just help us all understand, what is that differentiator? What is the thing that makes you so successful?
Yeah, and so I think I describe it as sort of a three bears problem is the simplest analogy. There's lots of competitors we're seeing. That we aren't the only one with this idea, and nobody's ever going to come tell you that Travis is one of the smartest people in the world. It's not a unique idea. It's not a unique idea that we had. I think we just had a differentiated way we came at it. And so we saw a lot of SAS tools that were starting to go at this space, but they don't have a lot of the certs that you need to host sensitive customer data. They support one framework or another. And then at the high end, you had your ServiceNows and Archers of the world, the legacy GRCs, where if you want to build something bespoke that is really complicated, they're a platform for building platforms. And so we don't do either one of those things. What we do is kind of sit in the middle. Everything's pre-built. You can think of it like an ERP for compliance. Everything's pre-built on best practices. It's up and running in seconds. It can deploy anywhere. So we can deploy in classified networks and isolated energy system ICS networks, all the way through our SaaS version that we host. We can deploy anywhere. It's up in minutes. You can be configured in hours and up and running. And so what we tried to do was get 80% of what the big boys in this space could do at 20% of the time and money. And then everything be API driven and compliance as code. That's where we think the sweet spot is. And there are people who do parts of what we do for sure. There are things they're doing that we can't do. But I think that's our sweet spot. We thought there was a spot in the middle where most people don't want to pay millions of dollars for a GRC. They don't want to take years to get the value, and they can't use these lightweight SaaS tools and highly regulated. And that was sort of the gap in the market we saw, is somebody needs to step in and find something that works out of the box, has a great user experience, fully automated, saves money, and is up and running and easy to use. And so that was sort of the niche we walked into. But I don't disagree with you at all that there are many competitors and others doing similar things in this space, but that's kind of our niche.
That's great. And in terms of the regulations and the audits themselves, they're changing so frequently. How do you keep up? How do you help your clients keep up?
Yep,
good question.
Absolutely. So we've got the ability, we call it Transformer. You can think of it just like the movie or the cartoons, where you can map frameworks to one another and it will automatically generate different versions of the document for different auditors while reusing evidence. So we focus really heavily on reuse. We're also talking to partners who are really good in this space, way better than we're ever going to be. We're not trying to be a regulatory clearinghouse for compliance. So we'll partner with folks like the Unified Controls Framework, UCF, to bring in some of the regulatory change management, keep things up to date for them in real time through that integration. And that'll be, a 29th integration on top of the 28 we have. So there's a lot like that we just continue to build as we grow. But we're going to count on others who focus in that area. So there are folks who do change management. There's people who do scanning tools. There's people who do CI/CD tools. We just want to sit in the middle and make the audit part seamless as possible.
So going back to what you're talking about making it seamless, and my anecdote about the early compliance portals, that were badly designed. I think a lot of it really does go around the evidence. I actually helped a friend of mine who has a small consulting company who built a product, who tried to build one of these tools that didn't suffer the same issues. And we found the key was really around compliance collection. The problem with those early portals was that they started after they assumed you already had all the evidence. And that was the really gnarly, painful part, where you're, looking over people's shoulders and asking for screenshots and files, and then you forget something and have to go back and ask for it later, and they're coming in via email and all kinds of non-ideal, maybe not the most secure methods. And so you actually have a CLI interface, like a command line interface for evidence collection, right?
We do. And so the CLI, the idea here of RegOps is bringing the principles of DevOps to compliance. And most of the DevOps tools have a command line interface of some sort where you can automate around it. And so all those integrations I mentioned that plug into your CI/CD, that plug into your scanners, they're all CLI driven. So you attach it to some sort of orchestrator, whether that's a cron job, a serverless function, whatever it may be. And you tell it how often you want to pull your evidence, what you want to do with it, kind of what your SLAs are. It will automatically update your inventory, your issues. It'll assign tickets in your ITIL tool like a Jira or a ServiceNow, and it keeps all that ticked and tied with automation. And so everything that we can automate, we try to drive through that CLI interface. So that RegScale for DevOps is a growing use case for us. So plug it into software factories. The move to software bill of materials, we can automatically update your assets in their SBOMs as things are pushed on every push, and keep that up to date in your compliance paperwork. So when the next log4j drops, you can see exactly which software you have that's running it, when it was introduced, and gauge your risk exposure rapidly. Things that are really hard to do today, we think with this DevOps for compliance become trivial exercises in the future.
Right. How involved do you get with the people making the regulations? I know a lot of compliance and regulations have open periods where you can contribute to questions. They've got working groups and things like that. Do you guys get really involved in that kind of stuff to maybe encourage them to make it easier to automate some of these things?
Lightly, we try to influence it, but I wouldn't describe us as a heavy into the regulatory side of it. Like if I could be king for a day and have an ask, I'd quit making it Oprah, where everybody gets a compliance framework. Like everybody who shows up, you get a compliance framework, and you get a compliance framework, and all these poor companies have to comply with all of them, and they're largely 90% redundant across them. So like consolidation of frameworks, I think is the thing the industry needs the most. And then if you consolidate and wrap automation around it, then you've got an end-to-end solution that's cost effective, gets a better result, and has a lot less pain and frustration in it than the current process does.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah. Anything else we haven't touched on that you think is kind of central, to this story, to how you're doing what you're doing?
Yeah, I think the one thing I always like to say is like, there's nothing anybody accomplishes by themselves. So there's a whole team of people at RegScale that are, contributing to this DevOps, RegOps movement. But also Dr. Aorga at NIST and OSCAL are foundational for us. We really built on their thought leadership. It really was the genesis for this product. And then we're working with partners like Wiz that are really pushing the boundaries of what you can do with checks at scale in the cloud and other tools. And so it's really an ecosystem play. And so while we talked a bit about RegOps, we talked a bit about RegScale, it's an ecosystem coming together around solving this problem. That's where the true value lies. And as you all mentioned, that we're not the only ones in this space. It's a big market. There's room for lots of us. You may like their take better than ours or ours better than theirs, but the ecosystem to working together on the problem, I think, is what'll move the industry forward.
Awesome. Well, Travis, thank you so much for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly today.
Thanks for having us. We appreciate the opportunity, and it's always a pleasure to see you guys.
All right. Talk to you soon. And we'll be back right back in a few moments with the weekly enterprise news.